September 5th, 2021. Episode 15, Evil's Burden. 24th day of Flame Rule. Weather forecast, moderate temperature, clear sky, gentle breeze. How does one go about facing off with a colossal being? It is not a question I ever thought I would be prepared to answer, but now, I would begin by saying not to do it as one. No. This sort of foe is best dealt with in the company of those you trust. With comrades who can scale the tall frame of the wiry beast, despite how it tries to shake them loose. With friends who can stall and strike it, with clever spells, or make use of precise aim to hit it in its weakest areas. Companions who are capable of drawing its attention, yet far too elusive and intelligent to be in the path of its powerful strikes. And when you combine all of that, you might just find yourself on the better end of things. Which I'm sure Moose likely felt that way, when the final bolt from her crossbow directly planted itself into the rune-etched crown of the beast, causing it to fall to its knees before ultimately collapsing. We all stood apart from the felled creature as its remains crumbled into rubble, leaving behind black and white tendril-like beams of energy that shot towards the sky and disappeared just as fast. And there, in the wake of the colossal's dust, was an ornate, cylinder-shaped figurine covered in moss. Above this statuette was a spectre that resembled that of an elf man, though his features were far sharper and slender, some ethnicity of elf that I did not recognize at the time. His eyes glowed, his form and pedestal bathed in a warm and brilliant light, as though he were a gift bestowed upon us by one of the gods. He gestured towards us with significance, and began to speak in Sylvan tongue. Thane was able to translate his words to us. He was offering us his thanks. Now my true rest can begin, he continued, and as he spoke, a spear began to mold itself into existence right from the palm of his hands. A beautifully crafted spear, made from vibrant wood and living vines, with a blade shaped like leaves. He then offered the spear to us from his position over the pedestal. I stepped forward and accepted the weapon, but upon leaving his surrounding light the spear changed to stone, its design becoming simplistic much like the sword that had led us here. The spectre began to speak to us once more, this time offering to answer a single question, but he cautioned us by saying, "My place in this world is fixed. My knowledge is as well." We exchanged looks with one another, before Thane stepped forwards asking a question in Sylvan. "What do we need these weapons for? The forms you see them in now are corrupted. If you are able to purify them, you may find your answer." He went on to explain that the corruption was likely tied to whatever had imprisoned his soul there to begin with. He requested that should we come across more of his kind who are trapped, that we free them, so that they may finally be at peace as well. Upon agreeing to his plight, the figurine below him crumbled, his spirit following suit, as his aura lifted towards the sky and dissipated. Once the statue was completely reduced to dust, the brilliant light that once surrounded it vanished. I looked to the spear in my hands. It was radiating in the sun just as the sword had, but there was no beam of light pointing anywhere. We took a little bit of time to regroup before deciding to head back to Secomber. Moose kept the beginning of the journey interesting, by monologuing the most recent events to us excitedly, though whether it was for her or us, I'll never know. We traveled in what we imagined to be the quickest way back to town, based on the map. Walking over rolling hills, before rounding a corner and coming across a group of egg-shaped beings with tendrils for eyes. These creatures had situated themselves into a triangle formation, their bodies were soft and pink. Kyokyojo, who had been in the lead, turned to face the rest of us with a grin over his face, referring to the creatures as flumphs. He turned back to watch them, pointing out their movements and calling it a ritual. As we made our way closer, we could see that there were about a dozen of them in the formation and we could also hear them singing. Kyokyojo, who seemed quite unafraid of the flumphs, asserted that they were good creatures, wise and intelligent, as well as telepathic on some level. He started to approach them as the rest of us remained back, going on to say that they changed color based on their mood and that they would connect with the emotions of those around them, which in turn could affect how they change. Once Kyokyojo was only mere steps in front of the first flumph, it began to change green. He stopped near it for a moment, and then gracefully he began to mimic its swaying motions, dancing just as the creature was. Once Kyokyojo's dancing had synced up with the entire group, the flumps moved in such a way as to grant him a spot in their formation. The rest of us remained off to the side, watching the mesmerizing display for but a moment, when one of the flumps then reached for Kyokyojo's hand. He willingly offered it in return, and a small tattoo appeared where the creature had touched him. A blessing for allowing the creature to see into his brain telepathically. Kyokyojo bowed his head in thanks to the creatures as they seemed to end their dancing ritual. Kyokyojo returned to us, branding the sigil over his hand proudly. Sometimes, I find myself pleasantly surprised by Kyokyojo's random bouts of knowledge and feats, and it is in those moments that I can appreciate that not all of his experiences are just fables. It is just hard to know which are just stories, and which aren't, when tales carry on and grow as they often do. We continued on our travels, noticing a clear running stream which we decided to stop at for a drink. Now normally, the High Moor isn't known for being particularly kind to us, so I'm not sure what was going on that day. It was as if Lady Luck herself, Avandrum, was smiling at us perhaps due to our most recent deeds, as out from the brush on the other side of the water appeared a beautiful white horse with a gold mane. It was an actual unicorn. I had never known for certain that they were real, or that they would be on the prime material plane. Moose and Kairax both looked at me rather matter-of-factly, apparently well aware of their existence all along. Kairax informed us that unicorns are tied to a deity and that she was able to sense the celestial energy coming from it. All I had really known was that unicorns were often the chosen mount for heroes. After bowing its head to get a drink, the unicorn finally looked up to notice it had an audience of adventurers staring at it. Now that we had garnered its attention, Kairax decided to approach it with an offering of food. The unicorn gracefully accepted the gift, and so the rest of us joined her in greeting it. Thane was granted permission to pet the unicorn, as was anybody else who asked. I can't speak for my friends, but I never imagined coming across such an astounding creature. I think I was really taking in its beauty when it suddenly made eye contact with me, and spoke. "That is quite an aura," came a male voice from within my mind. "What is?" I questioned. "I see it isn't realized yet, but promise me that once you figure out your gift, to use it for good." How do you respond to such a request? I affirmed I would, of course. That was what I had planned on doing all along, but I also had so many questions behind such words. Because I couldn't, or I can't fully grasp them. Even now, after mulling it over, I'm still left with nothing but utter confusion. "I believe you," the unicorn responded after I agreed, and then his horn began to glow an array of colors. A blessing was bestowed upon all of us, one that gave us a feeling of renewed energy. Then the unicorn cantered away, disappearing over the hills of the High Moor. We arrived back in Secomber by evening time and decided to all go our separate ways. Moose set out for the temple to join her mother. Svend had mentioned going fishing. Kairax had to tend to the animals at her residence. Thane and Kyokyojo were quiet about what they had planned as usual. I decided to just head home for the night to finish cleaning up my house. My father happened to be there when I arrived. He was relieved to see me, and almost as if he had a divine sense for music, he questioned me about the whereabouts of my violin when he saw I wasn't holding it. I had to come clean and tell him it had been missing since the day of the attacks, which didn't go over well as expected. I told him I would continue to look for it by checking the pawn shop the next day, but this did not seem to lift his spirits, and I'm sure he went to bed depressed that night. I know I went to bed feeling guilty about it. The next day, the 25th of Flame Rule, I was greeted with moderate winds and mid-70s temperature as I read while walking to the party's agreed meeting spot that morning. I had Mage Hand carry the book for me, because I was assigned with bringing the spear, until I was interrupted by Moose's shouts. Once everyone had arrived, we headed to the Adventurers Guild together. We turned in the gold idol of Chauntea to Ermir Wit, and gained credit for that task, as well as the paperwork for the magic item scam. With those two requests completed, we had finally fulfilled the adventuring quota to receive our licenses. Despite being in a hurry to get this taken care of, a mere wit impeded us with conversation. And yes, I say it that way because I don't ever want to talk to him if I don't have to, but he did end up making a good point. We did not have a name for ourselves. We, as in our adventuring company, Svend, Thane, Moose, Kairax, the great Kyokyojo and Siluca. As much as I hate to agree with a mere wit, if we were bound to keep traveling and adventuring together, then it only made sense to dub the entirety of the group something, to make it easier on those we may help in the future. This led to a very long and ridiculous discussion, borderline argument, on what that name should be. I won't go into detail about it, just know that some pretty silly ideas were thrown out there, before we finally all settled on the name, Page Force. Upon reaching that conclusion, we made our way over to City Hall and were given our chips to prove we were at last fully realized adventurers. I held my chip up for a moment, my eyes narrowing in on what was inscribed on it. E77. All this fuss for such a bland label. I nearly died for it. Such is the way of bureaucracy though. There is a part of me who hates the institutionalizing of adventure. I am not a Kyokyojo, but I understand the reason behind it. How else would we rein in those who choose to do harm in the alleged name of adventure? Still, I hope it shouldn't prevent me from discovering and experiencing amazing things in the future. From City Hall, we headed to a couple of pawn shops, but there was no such luck in finding my violin in any of them. Kyokyojo was growing impatient, and since I really had no idea where else to look, I chose to give up for the time being. We decided to go and grab something to eat, before heading over to see Kyrax's mentor, Elise. While on the way, I used detect magic to verify that the spear also had divination magic, just as the sword did. Once at the tavern, Moose and I spent our idle time watching Kyrax attempt to press a forget-me-not to her adventurer's token. Thane then rejoined us after having stepped away for a while, and he apparently had returned with news for me. He had heard rumor that everything stolen during the raid was supposedly being hoarded somewhere near town. I thanked him for this bit of information, and honestly, I am truly touched that he was willing to look further into it for me, because I was at my wit's end. Thane comes across as a bit rough with his dryness at times, but he is kinder than he would be willing to let you believe. Now with the entirety of our newly dubbed adventuring party, Page Force present, we decided to discuss some of the ongoing topics and trials we had been dealing with as of late, over a meal of pickled sausage. While we had this meeting, I started putting together a list. Here it is below. We need to find and kill the Hark. We need to figure out why the Shusuva didn't kill us. What is the deal with Svend's sword? I don't have cave madness. Find the spirit of adventure in the high moor. Get revenge on the woman who killed Moose's father. We need to figure out what is going on with the stone weapons we have gotten. Go talk to the Mages Guild. We need to find my violin. There is rumor of a hoard of what was looted from town somewhere nearby. Go to the Sea of Fallen Stars. Find the missing caravan from the Kyokyojo compound. Svend has a favor with Telchar Brightmaster due to handing over Cyanrath's spear. Thane has some mysterious magical items he has chosen not to trade. Defeat more stone colossus and free the trapped spirits of elves. Deal with the cult of the dragon who is recruiting. The Zentarum are in town. Some of the conversation did get a little heated as we went over all of this. Kyokyojo surprisingly had a lot to say about Moose running into combat with the Colossus. He wasn't necessarily wrong about what he said, but I found it hard to keep my mouth shut and not jump to Moose's defense. His argument was that we hadn't known if it was something that should be attacked, and that we shouldn't just do things without thinking. I agree with both points, but I also think we may have very well have just done nothing, if Moose hadn't tried something. Sometimes I think a catalyst is sort of, well needed. But I don't know, I might praise Moose for her willingness to try something, but not always for her methods. As for Kyokyojo's point about not knowing if the Colossus was a creature we should fight, I feel as though that is something we will encounter again. I don't think we're always going to know if fighting is the answer, or what the correct response is. How could we possibly? I don't want to ignore his points, but I don't want him to ignore mine either. Kyokyojo is certainly capable, and he has shown that he has an ability to lead, and that he can be decisive in a pinch. But I also think that being a leader isn't just about taking the literal lead. I think he could communicate with the rest of us better, instead of just voicing all of his frustrations after the fact. That being said, I need to watch Moose more closely, and stress the same importance of communicating first to her as well. I think she may have gotten it to a degree after that conversation, but I never can tell with her. After we left the tavern, we made our way to the Temple of Joaquin so that Kairax could speak to Elise. There, we recited the tale of what we had just encountered to her, and asked for her advice on what the ghostly elf had said. She suggested that the elves might use the word impure for something different than we would. She also expressed her concern at the true evil of forcing a soul to power a golem. The nature of evil is the refusal to bear the burdens of what is sacrificed for power, to force another to bear that burden for them. I won't forget her grave expression as she rehearsed those words to us. She went on to say that this was a far greater evil than we had ever encountered, leagues over someone such as the Hark. We then took our leave of Elise, none of us feeling better after having such an ominous talk with her. From there, we made our way over to the Mages Guild, only because Kyokyojo kept asking me if I had passed my test, and it was driving me mad so. It pushed me to get answers. I guess I should thank him for the motivation, but I will not. Upon arriving at the stairs of the Mages Guild, Shang Featherbinder appeared before us. I explained to him my reason for being there, what with my test being interrupted before. He offered out his hand, and I was taken into a room with a white stone altar. There was an ornate rug below my feet. It was creepily quiet and cold in that space. It was there that I was presented with a choice, to conduct the test in private with Shang Featherbinder only, or with the usual audience. I chose the latter option, as I was concerned with being given any special opportunities that didn't ring as true in my mind. I was congratulated upon making that choice, because apparently, that in itself was a test as well. I was assured by Shang Featherbinder that he would be reaching out to me for rescheduling. I returned to my friends with an air of relief that I could finally tell Kyokyojo something, so maybe he could let the whole thing go. End of chapter. Notes that Siluca doesn't or wouldn't know. The flumph that touched Kyokyojo's hand was telepathically checking him for signs of deception. The blessing Kyokyojo gained from the flumphs was a one-time instance of the spell True Strike. When in the presence of the unicorn, Svend felt as though his sword was both physically and metaphorically lighter. Thane used Thieves' Cant to find out the information regarding the whereabouts of Siluca's missing violin.